Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a fairly brief video, just like walking through the dedications pages for my books which have been published to date, and a few which are works in progress, which I have already begun to assemble or like completed the dedications, and like other front matter page for. Sometimes I like to include like quotes and stuff in addition to just the dedication on that particular page of the front matter. And I do have many more hiatus works in progress, but they don't, most of them, like none, to my knowledge, like none of them have like dedications page. I started, they just, I was writing them. I wasn't even like thinking of doing a dedications page at that point. And they're like, all waiting patiently in the queue. So obviously I will eventually like do a future video when I have like, dedications pages for all those future books. And I do also have a future video planned about like different other kinds of front matter, but this is just for the dedications page. And so anyway, let's just get down with it. This is the first book which I published, obviously far from the first book I ever wrote, but I just felt, it was best to lead with what I felt was my strongest material at the time, particularly because this is like a fairly short, it's only about, I think, like 128,000 words. Believe it or not, that's a drop in the bucket for me, like particularly with like historical fiction. And I do have a previous video about this book. Unfortunately, I kind of like fumbled my recitation of the Shakespearean sonnet, which inspired the title. It's called and Jacob flew the fiend away. I really do know that sonnet by heart, and I redeemed myself by reciting it in a later video last April for National Poetry Month. But unfortunately, I just like blanked in front of the camera. I was still getting confident like speaking on camera and speaking by myself, so I like totally forgot lines I really knew. So anyway, this is the dedications page. It was very important to me to do these particular things. Dedicated to the brave, righteous people of the Netherlands who served in the resistance instead of being silent or active collaborators, and to all my fellow limpers, past, present, and future, particularly Curly, that's obviously Curly Howard of the Three Stooges, and in loving memory of all my loved ones who left the material world before my lifelong dream of publication finally came to fruition. I was particularly thinking about my paternal grandparents. My paternal grandma, she sadly passed away only a few weeks before this book came out, and my uncle, it's like shocking to think I've now, outlived him. So by like 10 years, I get like 9 years technically. He died when he was 33, and I'm now 43. So like I'm, 9 years older than he ever got to be. All glories to Hashem, without whom I wouldn't have been given a gift for writing from such a young age, and without whom my brain wouldn't have been wired according to divine will. Hashem means the name in Hebrew. It's frequently used as a term for God. I don't think I like really started doing this, like it didn't become a habit natural to me, maybe like 10, 12-ish years ago. Now I couldn't imagine like not like using the term Hashem. It's just like sometimes you don't do something for a long time, and then suddenly it becomes a habit or something that's an integral part of you, and like you can't imagine like how did I ever not use this like linguistic quirk or just like a particular like religious custom or just whatever. And so I also included a quote from the Tao Te Ching, one of my favorite quotes. The Tao Te Ching, I do have a previous video about like the Gia Fu Feng and Jane English, the translation in particular of this book, and what it means to me, like how I've used it, like quoted from it and stuff, like incorporated it in my different books over the years. I'm sorry, I'm blanking. This is a totally unscripted video, and so I, because the book is referenced of such a big part of like this book so many times, I felt it would be appropriate to use this quote. And because like I realized the Gia Fu Feng and Jane English translation is still under copyright, and you obviously don't want to get in trouble for something like that, particularly if you don't have like permission, or you don't want to pay like big bucks to use it. Sometimes so I decided to like mix and match my translation. So like, grabbed a little bit from the Gia Fu Feng and Jane English translation, combined with a couple of other older public domain translations. And this is chapter 31, and one of my absolute favorite chapters. Weapons are instruments of fear. A curse seems to follow them. This is not, I'm sorry, this isn't the entire chapter, by the way. I included like, ellipsis or whatever, like the 4 periods in a row to indicate text was left out. So, but this is, like a fairly good portion and representative. Weapons are instruments of fear. A curse seems to follow them. Weapons are unblessed things. They are not things a wise man resorts to. He uses them only when he has no choice. Peace and quiet are dear to a good soldier's heart, and victory no cause for rejoicing. Rejoicing over victory is the same as delighting in killing. If you delight in killing, you cannot fulfill yourself. War is conducted like a funeral. When many people are being killed, they should be mourned in heartfelt sorrow. Thus, a victory must be observed like a funeral. And this is I technically I know realize most people would consider it a sequel, but I've always personally considered these like one like consistent story that just needed two books to be told. And my intention was originally to it was based on a long like short story slash piece of backstory about these characters and particularly Jakob. But as I began, like fleshing it out significantly and turning it into a novel, and I'm 2012, I realized, oh, the perfect ending point, here it is. And like it felt right to just like include the rest of the material into its own separate volume, particularly because it's about Jakob and Ragel's first proper year as a married couple, in their like first year, well actually first year together, obviously living in America. Ragel has been in America since like the spring of 1945, and they did like get married in a very brief civil ceremony before they separated, and she like moved overseas with like some old family friends who were willing to like put her up in their house. But they really haven't been living together as a married couple until then. Like with all that entails, particularly for the era, they didn't even like technically consummate their marriage. They like didn't go all the way. They like did other things, but I chose to do like a kind of a tasteful fade to black in the wedding night scene in the first book. But there are some like explicit sex scenes in this book, if that kind of thing makes you squeamish. And I really did like this illustration, which I found it was like from one of those like pre-made book covers. It can't be used by anyone else. Again, I just absolutely love the silhouette art. Oh, this is like just a fairly simple dedication to all those who had the courage to rebuild their lives in new lands after the cataclysm they survived. And if you can't guess by now, I'm not really that like short and simple type, like, oh, to my precious mommykins, or to my precious darling sweet parents, or like something corny like that. That's just not my style at all. Like if I ever do that, like something's going on with me. I just like really big, deep, like heavy quotes for not quotes. No, well, I do quotes obviously, but like dedications like to themes or like specific people I admire. It's not like, oh, to my darling familykins or something like that. You can kind of guess I'm not a very like not emotionalist person, but it's just like I just don't feel like I have that kind of relationship with my like family. I would just like do a short dedication to like a family or friend. If I ever did, it would be like part of a greater thing, or like in addition to something else. I know some people might think that makes me seem like kind of like a heartless, like insensitive person, but sometimes you just like have the feelings you do in the relationship with your family. And this is Little Ragdoll. I have a separate video about that as well in my playlist, like all about my books and stuff. And I haven't yet gotten around to doing a separate video about And the Lark Arose from Sullen Earth, but I do have a previous video from last April on National Poetry Month, also reciting the Shakespearean sonnet, which inspired that title. And I'm still due to get new copies ordered for myself of And Jakob Flew the Fiend Away and Little Ragdoll, because since they were published in like physical form, I put out some new editions for them. Nothing really drastically changed, but I just added some new passages here and there, like added a little bit more to the notes in the back for Jakob's story, the first volume. And I also like changed, not changed completely the ending of Little Ragdoll, but I just like it was like different lines and stuff. I felt it would like tie in, like basically like repeating the first line of the book as the last line. Kind of like it really reminded me of like the As the World Turns, which became my favorite soap opera after Guiding Light, Jump the Shark. The first line of that show all those years ago was like, good morning, dear. And then the last line, like, 50 years or whatever later, was like, good night. So I thought it was like really sweet and emotional. And so anyway, I'm sorry if I'm rambling again. This video is completely unscripted, and for the Little Ragdoll donation, I'm sorry, not donation, dedication. To the real little girl who inspired the Four Seasons song, Ragdoll. Obviously, that's where the title and the whole idea of the story comes from. And to anyone who was ever a dark horse or different from the others, credit where credit is due. I couldn't have written this book without my wonderful soundtrack of the Hollies and the Four Seasons. I absolutely love those bands, like particularly the Hollies. They're like, I believe, my fourth favorite band, and the Four Seasons are in the lower half of my top 10. All events are linked together in this best of all possible worlds. Oft-repeated maxim of Pangloss and Candide by Voltaire. And that quote is like, fairly often mentioned throughout the book. Benedictus que venit in nomine Domini. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of God. Benedictus, 5th track on Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. That's Simon and Garfunkel's debut album. And I didn't need to get, copyright permission to include the quote, because it originally comes from the Latin Mass, which obviously is like public domain for, like over 1,000 years. So you don't need to ask anyone's permission. It's just like a song that's like using that particular line. Obviously, if I had been using like a not an image, like a video or whatever, like a musical, like audio thing, like using that lyric in that song, obviously I would have needed to get permission. But this is an Alexei lived in alternative history, which I do have actually now I have two videos about. I'm sorry for the camera angle. I should have fixed that before I started filming. One was like about my like working on the book and like the backstory and such like that, and just like basic summary. And the other one was unfortunately, I discovered I got this like bizarre, like defamatory, like libelous 1-star review on Goodreads for the book. In loving memory of Alexei, who deserved better than being forever 13, I will always believe he would have been a modern, humane, loving, compassionate Tsar, if only he'd been given the chance to live and prove himself. And here's my note on Russian pronunciations and names, which I include in the front matter of every book, which Russian characters. And by the way, that video is like finally upcoming about Russian transliteration, pronunciations, and names and stuff. And here's like some more quotes. These are from Alexei himself, the 3 quotes at the top. When I'm Tsar, there must be no one poor or sad. I want everyone to be happy. I enjoyed the sun and the beauty of summer as long as I can. Who knows whether one of these days I shall not be prevented from doing it. I am beginning to see the truth. At Tsarskoye, everyone lied to me. If I become Tsar, no one will dare to lie to me. I will make things right in this country. This quote appears again at the very end of the meat of the novel. I'm not counting the short epilogue afterwards. The word that rings joyfully throughout the universe, the word that appeases every pain and grief, the word that expiates all human guilt, the eternal word. Dost thou not know it? Tell me the word. Liebe, love. And the word Liebe does really appear in like really, really large print. These are the last 3 intertitles in F.W. Murnau's Faust from 1926. I would absolutely highly recommend that film. It's a classic of silent German expressionism and silent film in general. And here's another quote from the Tao Te Ching from chapter 43. Sometimes the softest thing in the universe can overcome the hardest thing in the universe. Believe it or not, I don't actually have copies of all of my own books, but I do hope to rectify that very soon. And as I did mention previously, I need to buy some new copies of some of them anyway. Little Raggle and Jakob Flew the Fiend Away, because they have since had some new editions, and those 2 books are also now available in hardcover as well as paperback. And this is a dedications page for You Cannot Kill a Swan, the love story of Lyuba and Ivan, which I recently did a video about because it was the 30th anniversary on the 31st of January of I'm starting that book all those years ago, back on the 31st of January 1993, like when I was 13 years old and in the 7th grade. Yes, believe it or not, I really am that old. I know I look a lot younger than I really am, and this was like a very personal dedications page to write for me, in memory of the real Mikhaila, and in memory of my family's first computer, our 1984 128K Mac, on which I began this story so many years ago. A part of that dear machine, who was treated like a member of the family, will always live on in this book. Finally, in loving memory of my favorite writer, Alexander Isayevich Solzhenitsyn, 11th of December 1918 through the 3rd of August 2008. Had I not discovered his writing on the 29th of December 1995 and instantly taken him into my heart, soul, and mind as my favorite writer and one of my heroes, it's doubtful my Russophilia would have been reawakened so powerfully, and thus inspired me to return to this juvenile story in September 1996, imbuing it with all the Russian culture and history, which had previously been almost completely absent. May his beautiful memory be for an eternal blessing, and may his soul rest in peace. And this is a dedications page for the sequel, the 12th time, Lyuba and Ivan on the Rocks. It's like fairly short and simple after the big, kind of grandiose thing that came before. To all the lovers who find their way back to one another, even after intense Sturm und Drang, credit where credit is due. I could never have written the first draft of this extremely long book without my wonderful Duran Duran soundtrack. It truly was one of those times when a book was writing me instead of the other way around, and I do like crediting my writing soundtrack when it's necessary in a dedications page, because we should always say thank you for people who help us, even if they'll never see the dedications page or know how they touched our lives. Now this is dedications page for Journey Through a Dark Forest, Lyuba and Ivan in the Age of Anxiety, the 3rd book in my family saga, The Battle of Lyuba and Ivan, and it was the same dedications page across all 4 volumes, because I've always been very, very clear. Particularly, this is one intense, massive book. It just, happened to be published in 3 separate volumes, and it, like, perfectly worked out through Hashkata Pratit, divine providence, that, each of the 4 parts reads, like its own self-contained story with the focus on different, like, characters and storylines, and, like, those, like, main threads have all been, like, brought to the, like, a fitting conclusion by the end. There's no, like, ending on a cliffhanger, like setting things up for the next book. No, they're just, stories that are completed, and they just, happen to all, like, naturally lead into one another. So, sometimes you have to do that. I was not going to, like, split it up and pretend it was, like, 4 separate books. No, it's like one book. It just, happened to come out in 4 volumes, and that will also be the same for the 4th book, which has unfortunately been on hiatus for a while. A Dream Deferred, Luba and Yvonne at University. But so anyway, this is a dedications page for Journey Through a Dark Forest, and it's, like, pretty, long and intense. Lovingly dedicated to all those who lived through the traumatic, world-altering events of 1933 through 48, including but not limited to the Great Depression, Gulag, the Holodomor, the Third Reich, the Great Terror, World War II, both service people and civilians, the Shoah, the internment of Japanese Americans, Japanese Canadians, and Japanese Latin Americans, the little-known, far less extensive internment of Italian Americans and German Americans, the European diphtheria epidemic of 1943, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This book is particularly dedicated to those who perished and to those whose stories are not often told in the conventional narratives. Once again, credit where credit is due. I could never have gotten through this massive book without my wonderful writing soundtrack, giving my longtime secondary character turned main character, Rodya, the surname Dranichov, was my humble way of saying thank you. Like, seriously, when I was looking for last names for him and some of the, like, the other characters, like, from Boris's, like, children in the religious school, and I decided to, like, make them into, like, main characters for this book, and I was just, looking at lists of Russian names, and I saw the name Dranichov, and I was like, wow, this is, like, totally perfect, like, great way to pay homage to my amazing writing soundtrack. And if you're interested, I do have a previous video on, like, how I became a Durrani. Like, believe it or not, like, one of these things is not like the others when it comes to my favorite bands. Like, sometimes I still can't believe I fell in love with a band who formed, like, only, like, I believe, like, a year before I was born, and they got famous in my lifetime instead of, like forming back in the, like, the 60s and being, like, famous way before I was born. This is a dedications page for the aforementioned 4th book, A Dream Deferred, Luba and Yvonne at University, which takes place from September of 1948 until, I'm not quite sure when it'll wrap up, but, like, the main meat of the story ends in June of 1952. The epilogue will be, like, sometime in the autumn, I believe. So, respectfully dedicated to all those who suffered under the dark reign of McCarthyism, both victims and survivors, the estimated 226,000 people who were killed in the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the several 100,000 who died of their resulting injuries and illnesses in the days, weeks, months, and years afterward, and the over 100,000 hibakusha who still suffer from atomic bomb-related health issues. All those with the courage to go against the grain in the conformist post-war era. And this is the dedications page for all 4 of the books in my Atlantic City prequel series, which takes place from 1938 until 1941. To the real-life righteous among the nations, like Holden Grigori Filliard, who saw the writing on the wall when the rest of the world chose to ignore it, and brought people to safety one step ahead of the storm on the horizon. This entire 4-book series is also dedicated to the real Ariania. Of all the people I based the original cast of characters on, she's the only one I've remained friends with all these years, and believe it or not, I have never told the real-life inspiration for Ariania. I based a character on her and her family and such. Obviously, over the years, she is, like, more than grown into her own, like, unique character with storylines and stuff, but there are, still, like, aspects of her personality and her family stuff that are, drawn from real life, not trying to be, like, a total cipher or such like that, but just, it did strongly inspire the original incarnation. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy content like this, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications bell. And I particularly really do like seeing comments from my viewers and subscribers, because I really would like to have, like, some more conversations with these guys and make more friends on booktube and authortube. And I really do appreciate all the support. A comment means so much more to me than a like, because, like, when I see a like or even a dislike that's not accompanied by a comment, I just, like, don't know what I was doing wrong or what I was doing right or what you want to see me, like, doing more of, or how I could improve my channel and such. And so anyway, thank you guys again very much for listening. I will see you soon. Bye.